The auction yard rang with harsh voices and harder laughter, a place where dust coated everything and mercy had long ago been trampled into the ground. Men crowded close, boots scuffing the earth, eyes sharp with hunger that had nothing to do with food. When the Apache woman was dragged forward, the chains at her wrists clinking dully, the noise softened for a moment. She was thin, her clothes worn nearly to rags, but there was nothing small about the way she stood. Her shoulders were straight, her chin lifted, and her eyes moved over the crowd without fear. As the auctioneer began his practiced chant, she spoke, her voice calm and steady, carrying farther than anyone expected. "Don't waste your money on me," she said. "I am not what you hope for. I will not bow and I will not forget." The words unsettled the men. Some laughed loudly to hide their discomfort. Others spat curses, but the bidding hesitated, then surged again as pride took over. To them, defiance was just another challenge to be broken. At the edge of the yard, Caleb Boone watched in silence. He had planned to leave town before sundown, pockets light but conscience clear. He had seen enough cruelty in his years on the trail to know better than to linger. Yet something in the woman's voice held him in place. There was no plea in it, no attempt to soften the truth. It sounded like a warning offered out of dignity, not despair. As the bids climbed, Caleb felt a weight settle in his chest. He told himself to turn away, to mind his own business, but his boots carried him forward instead. When he spoke his offer, the yard went quiet for a heartbeat before the auctioneer slammed the gavel down. The sale was done. A few men cursed him openly, accusing him of wasting good money. The woman turned to face him, her eyes sharp and assessing. "I told you not to," she said. "You paid for trouble?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, drew the knife from his belt, and cut the rope binding her wrists. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but no one stopped him. He handed her a canteen, watching as she took a careful drink. "I didn't buy obedience," he said evenly, "and trouble doesn't scare me much." They left town together as the sun dipped low, the road ahead stretching wide and empty. The woman rode stiffly, every muscle alert as if expecting a trap at any moment. Caleb gave her space, letting the silence grow. At last, she asked where he was taking her. "Home," he replied. "You'll eat, you'll rest. After that, you decide what comes next." She studied his face, searching for the cruelty she had learned to expect. Finding none, she looked back to the open land. "My name is Nalan," she said. "I will work if I stay, but I belong to no one." Caleb's ranch sat alone at the edge of a wide valley, a modest cabin of weathered wood, a small corral, and a creek that cut through the land like a quiet promise. When they arrived, Nalan dismounted without waiting for instruction, her eyes scanning the place for hidden dangers. She slept that first night on the floor near the door, wrapped in a blanket but fully dressed, waking at every sound. Caleb noticed but said nothing. Trust, he understood, could not be demanded. Before dawn, Nalan was already awake. She carried water from the creek, split kindling with practiced efficiency, and set about cleaning the small space without being asked. When Caleb rose, he found coffee warming and the horses brushed. "You don't have to prove anything," he told her. She met his gaze calmly. "I prove things for myself," she replied. Days passed in careful silence. Nalan worked hard, her movements precise, her attention always sharp. She watched how Caleb handled tools, how he spoke gently to the animals, how he never raised his voice even when things went wrong. At night, he left food on the table and retired to the porch, giving her space she had never known before. Slowly, her guarded posture softened, though the walls in her eyes remained. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning, rain pounding the roof and thunder shaking the valley. With nowhere else to go, they sat inside together, the fire casting long shadows on the walls. The silence felt different then, heavier, pressing for words. Nalan spoke first. She told him of her family, scattered by violence and hunger, of days spent walking under the sun with chains cutting into her skin, of learning to survive by becoming invisible. Her voice did not break, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When she finished, she looked at him and said, "You could sell me tomorrow. Many would pay. It would be easy." Caleb shook his head. "Tomorrow we ride to town," he said. "Not to sell you, to set things right." He kept his word. The clerk barely looked up as Caleb signed the papers. "But Nalin felt the weight of the moment like a sudden breath of air after years underwater. Freedom, written in ink, placed into her hands. She stared at the page, afraid it might vanish. "Why?" she asked quietly. Caleb shrugged, uneasy with gratitude. "Because no one should be owned," he said, "and because you told me not to waste my money." When they rode back, the land looked different to Nalin, wider somehow. She was still wary, still cautious, but something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she was choosing where she stood. Spring crept into the valley quietly, turning the hard ground soft and green, and with it came change Nalin could feel in her bones. Though she was free by law now, freedom in the world was never simple. Word traveled faster than the creek, and riders began to pass by the ranch more often than before, slowing as they looked, asking questions that carried sharp edges. Caleb answered them calmly, his presence steady as a fence post. Nalin watched from a distance, learning that protection did not always need raised voices or drawn guns. One night, trouble finally rode straight through the gate. A man dismounted without invitation, his eyes roaming the cabin and the land as if still measuring worth. He spoke to Caleb but looked at Nalin, his meaning clear. Before Caleb could answer, Nalin stepped forward. She held a rifle easily, not threatening, not shaking. Her voice was calm, colder than the night air. "I am not for sale," she said. "And I am not alone." The man laughed once, uncertain, then left. When the sound of hooves faded, Nalin realized her hands were steady. So were Caleb's. After that, the days settled into a rhythm that felt almost gentle. They worked side by side, mending fences, planting a small garden, tending horses. Nalin taught Caleb how to read the hills for weather and how to move quietly through brush without leaving a trail. Caleb taught her to ride bareback and to trust the land to carry her weight. They spoke more now, sometimes laughing, sometimes sharing long silences that felt safe. Yet Nalin felt a pull she could not ignore. One evening, as the sun burned red along the horizon, she told Caleb she had heard word of Apache kin beyond the ridge, survivors who might still remember her family name. She expected resistance. Instead, Caleb helped her pack. He gave her supplies, a good horse, and the rifle she had learned to use. "You don't owe me staying," he said simply. At dawn, she stood by the gate, the land stretching wide in every direction. "You bought my body once," she said softly, "but you gave me back my life." Caleb tipped his hat, unable to find better words. She rode out without looking back, carrying more than supplies, carrying choice. Weeks later, a trader delivered a letter written in careful hand. Nalin had found her people. She was safe. Caleb folded the paper and looked out across the valley. The ranch felt quieter but fuller too, as if freedom itself had passed through and left something lasting behind.